So Section 5 will start to deal with decision support systems and expert systems. These are going to be specialized systems that organizations are going to use to help them make decisions. It's going to be able to process data from a number of different sources and try to make sense of how all that stuff works together. So again, the idea here with these systems is that every organization is going to run into situations where they need help making decisions, and the amount of options and the amount of data and the amount of alternatives out there are pretty complex. However, if they can use technology to help eliminate some of the options that don't really make the most sense, or are not optimized, or sometimes you need to minimize different areas. Again, this is what these decision support and expert systems are good for companies to work through. So the basic building blocks is going to be data. We're going to talk a lot about data too as we move into the next part dealing with quantitative analysis. Um, but we all start with this raw data, right? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to turn data into some sort of information. So we'll organize it, we'll do some sort of calculations with it, we'll try to figure out an average, that kind of stuff. And from that information, we're hopefully going to gain some knowledge. Now, here's the thing that I want you to understand. Everything that data and information provides to us, it lacks one thing, and that is meaning. We humans are the only people who can actually provide meaning to information, to data. Is this meaningful or not? We can decide what is important and what's not important, what should be kept and what should be discarded. Okay, but collecting, analyzing, all of those things, that is all part of the decision support system. Um, Again, it kind of looks at decisions that are broken out into two different categories. One is going to be programmed. These are going to be like the routine, every single day, repetitive, kind of relatively easy. There's a set of rules that we're going to follow, and now we know what to do. So I often think about like Amazon, right? I need to move a package from the distribution center to my home. How do I do that? Well, that's a pretty routine thing that they run into every single day. What's the traffic? What's the weather like? Who's the closest? Logistically, should we use the post office? Should we use UPS? Should we use FedEx? Those kinds of program decisions are going to be pretty routine in the daily day of the business, right? The non-program decisions are going to be those one-off things, right? We need to build a new warehouse distribution in the United States if I'm Amazon. So now I'm looking at, okay, how many households are within a certain driving distance? How likely are those households to be Amazon members and order from us all the time? How easy is it for other distribution centers to get to our center to drop off material? Suppliers, what kind of roads? What are the conditions of the roads? What kind of weather do they have there? Do they run into snowstorms and flood? You know, all the things that you think about, right? Like there's so many different variables. These are the unprogrammed decisions that have to happen, that have to occur. And so that's exactly what decision support systems are good at doing. Another way to look at it is structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. It's really about the variables and how they kind of come in here. So structured decisions, the variables that comprise the decision are known and can be measured and quantitatively understood. Unstructured decisions are typically variables that we really don't know. We have an idea, right? You think about the stock market. Try to predict the stock market in the next 2 years. Wow, I can barely predict it in the next 2 minutes. Okay, and so when we talk about unstructured decisions, there's so many uncontrollable, unforeseen variables out there that it's extremely difficult to even come up with or try to quantify, some of those issues that go into that decision-making process. And then you kind of have the semi-structured, which is variables that are both measured and quantifiable, and then a whole bunch of like qualitative, how people feel kind of variables that go into that. And so Rarely do you get a situation where it's all one way or the other. There's almost all decisions are going to come down to someone like this semi-structured decision making. And again, the systems, the technology are super good at looking at the structured decisions. They can take variables, they can crunch numbers, they can do the math a lot faster than we can and with more accuracy. But it's up to us to actually apply meaning to what those decisions look like from a qualitative perspective. Okay. Decision-making process is going to combine a couple different components in the problem solving. One is the intelligence stage. Again, we're trying to identify and define the potential problem and opportunities. What's the issue? What are the potential solutions to that? And then we're going to, in decision stage, we're going to develop those alternative solutions, evaluate their feasibility, their costs, their pros and cons, the ramifications, if we can kind of see what are the consequences. Try to look at, well, what are the unforeseen consequences of those decisions? What are the black swan events out there that we may or may not understand? Again, black swan is a term that represents a statistical event that's so unlikely. It should happen only once in a million years, but it's happened several times. So, for example, in the stock market, a black swan event would be the crash that happened in 1929. Unfortunately, that exact same event happened about 60 years later in the 1980s, at the end of the 80s. So again, it should happen based upon probabilities once every, a million years, but it's happened in 60 years. So that would be a black swan event. Sorry, kind of a side note there. And then finally, the choice stage is where we select a course of action. So again, we look at just making a decision, we gather information, we lay out all the options, and we make a decision. After that, then we want to implement and monitor that decision. So this is an iterative process, right? We're constantly looping back and forth. A lot of times organizations will take on different methodologies, and there's all kinds of good books out there that talk about some of the best ways to make decisions. I've heard of this one called Create and Destroy, where companies will simply you could have a great idea, but the goal of everyone else in the room, called a red team, is to destroy your idea, break it apart. What if this happened? How would that happen? And really just see, okay, if everything goes the opposite of what we think, and north becomes south and south becomes north, what do we do? How will we go forward in this decision making process? So decision support systems can handle some of that, but again, it's up to you and I to actually apply meaning to those areas, to those different ideas. Um, Optimization models, a lot of this stuff is gonna be kind of like sensitivity analysis is one of the ideas for optimization. Sometimes we want to minimize costs, and so if we know all the inputs, we can run a quick Excel and do a minimization problem. If we want to maximize profit and we know all the inputs, we can quantify all those things. We can figure out how to maximize profits, how much of certain products we need to stock and to sell and to push in order to maximize profits. And again, it's a simple Excel maximization problem. These are pretty much structured, right? We know the variables that are coming in, they're all quantifiable. That's a structured thing. But when we get into some of the other areas, right, where we really don't know maybe what the market's for, we're launching a new product or a new innovation, and we're not really sure if there's a market for this at all. We don't have historical numbers and historical data to put into our model. So we're using some rules of thumb, trying to figure out the best case, worst case scenario, and seeing which variables are the most sensitive to the outcome. Okay. The benefits of a decision support system or an expert system: performance, right? We should make better quality decisions. The complexity of the problem should be able to be broken down, and we should make decisions faster, ideally. The negative, right? There's a cost to this. All of these things have a cost. So you'll often hear things like, "Hey, let's not spend $1,000 to solve a $5 problem." That doesn't make any sense. And so the biggest thing that we have to kind of weigh here is the cost of running and implementing a DSS. Does it actually solve the problem in a more cost-effective manner than simply, paying to fix the problem ourselves, right? So we want to keep that in mind, is that these systems are great to help solve expensive issues and problems, but at the end of the day, it could just be simple as walking down the hall, making a copy, and calling it a day, right? Not trying to figure out these minimal things sometimes. So Again, sources of information for this, holy cow, just about everything. This is an example of a marketing information system. So it's a specific decision support system for marketing, and looking at all the different pieces and parts that go into a marketing decision. So you could have business and suppliers, your ERP, your enterprise resource planning system. You've got database. You have external sources of information coming in here from reports from your sales to inventory levels to marketing costs and what it costs to run a TV ad, your Salesforce information, your customer feedback, just all kinds of information come together. And hopefully, with all these different pieces and parts, we're getting a better look at the environment to help us make the best decision possible. But again, the point is that these have to help. And so if information is presented in such a way that doesn't make sense or is not easily determine what to do, it really doesn't do us a whole lot of good. Okay. Um, so again, some of the characteristics of a decision support system, it's going to provide rapid access to information. It's going to be able to offer textual and graphical orientation. In essence, it's going to be able to show us information a couple different levels. Some people love to read reports. Other people love to look at graphs, right? And so these systems need to be able to speak to both the visual, the conceptual learner, however people want to digest the information, we've got to be able to provide it to them in that way. But by far, it needs to be able to perform complex, sophisticated analysis and provide an advantage to us than we would have on our own. Okay. Some simulation analysis is important. Again, we talked a little bit about sensitivity analysis, determining which variables, um, uh, if a slight change causes a big change in the output, that would be a very sensitive variable in which we want to manage to. So, um, some of the capabilities, right? We've got support the problem solving phase. Again, support various decision frequencies. We can do ad hoc reports. We can look at the different operational level, tactical, strategic level. A DSS should be able to support the organization in all those different functions that are going on. Okay. There are certain systems out there that focus on specific industries. We looked at a marketing one. There's operations logistics decision support systems that focus on issues dealing with logistics. In the world I play in a lot in the financials, there's tons of systems that just help make decisions on a daily and minute by minute basis on for stocks and equities and trading and options and things like that. So all of these take in a bunch of information and kind of try to give you a visualization of the environment or textual um, situation analysis of the environment and help you make those decisions. That's really the goal of these systems. Okay. Group support systems is another area that's pretty common. This is really about collaboration. So having information all in one spot so that everyone on the team is understanding what's going on. A lot of times I think about like auditors, right? Going from location to location, working in a team setting, but the client needs to have access to that information to see what the auditors are doing. The company itself wants to know what your audit team is doing. So there's systems out there specifically that captures all the information, flags certain things that don't look right. Right, there's logic built into those systems, and then allows the team to collaborate and share documents and share information and still, what needs to be done to complete the audit, and what issues have arisen from the audit. So it really kind of helps the group to kind of make some of those decisions together and stay collaborative. Again, a lot of different group decision making systems here, decision support systems, and each industry, like I said, will have kind of their own standards they go by, and more of these are popping up, especially in the communication area. I just think a lot about smaller businesses. They seem to have a lot more options with the apps that are out there now to actually communicate and coordinate their efforts with different group members. So Again, read through the paragraph regarding decision support and expert systems. But for us, that is it for this lecture. Thanks so much.